Well, hello and welcome to another in the series of Café Insights. I'm Andrew Vine, founder and CEO of the Insight Bureau, and it's that time of the year. It's December the 2nd,
Ho,
but I'm not talking about Christmas. I'm talking about the fact that the Economist group publishes a fantastic magazine called The World Ahead. And today it's my pleasure to be joined by the editor of this, Tom Standage from The Economist.
Hello, good to be here again.
Terrific. Good to see you, and timely that you're here now. Tell us what you're doing in Singapore.
So I'm in Singapore to promote The World Ahead, so I usually go on the road for a couple of months after it comes out, and I basically go and talk to people about what to expect in the coming year. And I'm also here because we have the AI Innovation Asia event here in Singapore, and I'm chairing that as well. So it's great to be here.
Tell us a little bit about your role at The Economist. You're deputy editor, and you have this role of editing The World Ahead. But what does that really mean? What do you do on a daily basis?
The great thing about my job is that what I do is different every day, different every week, different every month. So yes, I do have this sort of anchor in my year that I spend the whole of September and October putting together the World Ahead report, and I have to have prepared for that. So there's a certain amount of work that's done in May and June to set us up for that. But basically, that happens every year, and then I promote it in December and in January. And then I have a few months where I can do something different every year, and it's really interesting because usually there'll be different requirements. This year I've spent a lot of time working on our internal AI initiatives because obviously they have to work. That involves bringing together people from across the business, and you have to have technologists, product people, and you need to have editorial people who know about AI, and that's actually what I originally studied at university. So I've been working on that. But last year it was really interesting. We had a couple of our science reporters left actually to go and do their PhDs in machine learning, and so we suddenly had a shortage of AI reporters. So I went back to my original job at The Economist, which was being a science and tech reporter, right. and I just wrote lots and lots of I did lots of reporting, wrote lots and lots of AI stories. Normally, though, what I'm doing is editing and commentary, so writing leaders and things like that about AI and tech and other subjects. So yeah, what I do in those other weeks and months of the year varies quite a bit, but really what I enjoy about my job is the variety and the fact that as deputy editor, I sometimes have to sit in for the editor-in-chief as well, and that's a great fun thing to do in addition.
Yeah. Once upon a time, you were considered the tech guy, and you've not taken your gaze off what's happening in the world of technology and innovation. But having to now, in your role, think about all the factors that make the whole world go round, from economics and geopolitics to technology, innovation, environment, energy, all those topics, to pull them all together.
No, absolutely. So my training is as an engineer and sort of physical sciences and computer science in particular. But I have, over the course of nearly 30 years at The Economist, picked up a certain amount of economics. And then, in the last 10 years, I've had to focus on geopolitics as well. And actually, I found that technology was sort of my way into those subjects, because technology has become much more geopolitically contentious. You have to sort of fight for who's going to win in AI and that kind of thing. And then you also have the relationship between technology and economics, that technology is one of the factors that determines economic development and so on. So I found that's been a very helpful way into those subjects. But yes, I have had to learn a lot more about all of them. And what I find really interesting is the way that what were previously quite separate areas have become much more interconnected. So if you want to understand geopolitics now, you need to understand trade, you need to understand economics, but you also need to understand technology. Yeah. And so being able to join all those dots, which is what I do at The World Ahead, that's what I find really interesting about all of this.
And so the magazine is out. This year seems to be quite different. It's like this seems to be a much more pivotal year in terms of what's going to happen.
Yes, I think that's fair to say, because there's a lot of uncertainty around, and there's been a lot of uncertainty around for the past few years. And, the way I characterise it is that the pandemic basically brought to an end a period of relative stability in a lot of areas. We didn't have major conflict between great powers. We didn't have, we had quite stable interest rates, low interest rates. There were lots of ways in which the world was we kind of got used to things being the way they were. It's been called a holiday from history. And it turned out in retrospect that wasn't actually the way that the future was going to be. And we then had this very uncertain period with the pandemic, and that uncertainty hasn't gone away. And if anything, it's kind of intensified with conflicts popping up in new places, with new technologies disrupting things, with the agent of chaos in the White House and so on. But what I think is really interesting about 2026 is, in addition to all of that uncertainty, so you've basically got geopolitical uncertainty, you've got trade uncertainty, you've got economic and market uncertainty, and you've got technology uncertainty. But I think there is a general sense that in all of these areas, that uncertainty at the level it is now, can't go on forever. One of the big unresolved questions in geopolitics is, where does Trump stand on China? We don't really know. But there's going to be a summit next year, and that we should get some clarity. They can't continue to have basically no policy on what they would do on Taiwan and the Philippines. So we should get an answer there. Similarly, on trade, can the trade war go on like this? Will it lead to a recession? Will they have to dial down the tariffs? We'll find out in the next 12 months. Yeah. And then on markets, we are overdue for a financial crisis of some kind. Will there be a bond market crisis? Will the change of leadership at the Fed spook the bond markets? Will the AI bubble pop? Again, we'll find out next year. And then finally, on AI in particular, there is a big question about whether the rate of adoption and the rate of revenue growth is matching the expectations of investors. I think they're going to be disappointed. I think we are going to have a correction. As with previous technologies, we're going to have booms and busts on the way to widespread adoption. So I'm very bullish about the potential of the technology generally going forward, but I think that we are probably going to have some kind of market correction in 2026. So in all of those areas, I think we're going to get some clarity that we don't have now. Not total clarity, but I think there will be less uncertainty about all of those things in 12 months than there is now. So in many ways, what happens in 2026 really sets the path for the next 5 or 10 years.
Right. Well, you come up with your top 10, and I think you've rattled most of those off now, right?
Obviously, one of the things we love in the world ahead is anniversaries, and so we've got the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, so we know that that's definitely going to happen. And then we've got the midterms kind of fitting into that as well, so we're going to be interesting state of affairs, because you're going to get very different accounts of where America is going from the Democrats and the Republicans, and then basically the voters get to pick which one they like the look of. So that's definitely happening. And then number 2 is this uncertainty over geopolitics, and in particular the US position. Does the US want to focus on its own backyard? Does it want to have this kind of spheres of influence model? That seems to be where Donald Trump is heading. Lots of talk from the administration about our hemisphere, all of this focus on Venezuela, etc., etc. So we should get some clarity there, I think. Number 3 is the kind of changing nature of warfare, and the fact that we have more and more of this grey zone hybrid warfare and sort of deniable cuttings of cables, sending drones into airports, grey area activity. Russia is doing this in Northern Europe, China is doing this in the South China Sea, and more and more of these sort of global commons areas like the high seas, the sea floor, the Arctic, space, cyberspace, they're all becoming contested areas, so I think that's worth following. Number 4 is how all of these trends are basically very bad for Europe and make its existing problems worse. But number 5 is the flip side of that, which is that the current situation is actually great for China. It's a really big opportunity to sort of fill some of the gaps where America is retreating, but also to present itself as the grown-up in the room. Right. When it comes to trade deals, China can say, you can trust us, when we make a deal, we'll stick to it, unlike certain other superpowers we could mention. Then 6 is about the economic worries. So I think the kind of worrying thing is that there's a growing number of plausible candidates for where the next financial crisis might come from. So as I say, possibly a slowdown because of the trade war, then a possible bond market crisis in the US, in France, in Britain, who knows. And then we're worried about the AI bubble bursting. And number 7 on my list is what's going to happen with AI. Is it going to be a boom or a bust? And is there going to be more of a backlash about AI and jobs? And I think whether or not the markets go up or down on this, there is growing concern, particularly about what's happening with graduate unemployment. And a lot of people are blaming that on AI. I think the evidence is it's a bit early to reach that conclusion now, but I think we're going to hear more about that, and people are going to worry more about that in 2026. 8 is about climate and energy, and basically it's a mixed picture because there's good news that Chinese emissions seem to have peaked, and that means global emissions have probably peaked. But at the same time, in 2026, it's going to become clear that we are not going to limit warming to 1.5 degrees above the pre-industrial average. So that's, so a mixed picture there. Number 9 is sport, which can usually be relied on to cheer us up. But sport is going to be very political in 2026, particularly the World Cup, where the US, Mexico and Canada are hosting it together. So drama on and off the pitch, I expect. And then also we're going to have the enhanced games in Las Vegas, where the participants are not just allowed but actually encouraged to take drugs, and that's going to lead to a lot of debate about sort of the ethics of performance enhancing drugs. And then number 10 is another kind of performance enhancing drugs, which is the weight loss drugs, Ozempic and Wegovy and all those other drugs, and new versions of those are coming in 2026 that are superior in all kinds of ways. And again, I think that's going to lead to debates about when it's appropriate to take these drugs, and can you take them as a lifestyle drug? Is it acceptable to keep it from your friends and family if you're using them, and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, lots of interesting things going on. But I think the main framing device is that kind of 2026 sets the agenda for the years to follow.
Wow, that was a race through those issues, and I think it's kind of indicative of the kind of challenges that people are facing. I mean, arguably, it's never been a more challenging time to be running international businesses with so much to think about. What do you think is really keeping people awake at night?
Well, I think it's mainly the uncertainty. I mean, there's so many different sources of it, and the sources of uncertainty are all sort of connected to each other. So you have the geopolitical, the market and economic uncertainty, and then you have the technology disruption happening at the same time. What can you do about this as a boss? You have to sort of give yourself options. A lot of companies have been stockpiling cash so that they've got sort of more buffers, more flexibility, so when they do see an opportunity they can move quickly. But we have seen a lot of people sitting on their hands and sort of saying, well, we're going to pause our investments and pause our decision making until things get back to normal. And I'm afraid, newsflash, things are not going back to normal. And so dealing with this uncertainty is just part of doing business these days.
I mean, that's the world we're working in, and the Insight Bureau, and working with people like yourselves. I mean, we're challenged to help people make sense of the world in order to make good business decisions. Hopefully, that makes us more valuable. Hopefully, it means a nice, busy 2026 for helping organisations with their planning strategy, bringing their teams together, and having meaningful conversations in conferences and events.
Well, we certainly live in interesting times right now.
Well, that's a curse, though, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. It's also a blessing. I find it makes my job more interesting.
Absolutely. Well, Tom, thanks very much for the quick chat.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'll see you again soon.